Hi, I'm Dyllan.
And I'm Salma. Welcome to Caring About Care, the podcast that shines a light on the care experience campaigning movement in England from the 1970s till, guess what, today.
This is a story that hasn't been told enough, one of courage, community and change. It's about those who grew up in care and the allies who stood with them, fighting for rights, recognition and reform in a system that often overlooks our voices. On this podcast, we'll begin this journey now by uncovering hidden stories, sharing personal stories and honouring the work that shaped today's care system. So joining us today is Brigid Robinson, the dynamic leader of Coram Voice. Brigid is deeply committed to ensuring children in and leaving care have their voices heard and their rights protected. Her career span leadership roles in social work, policy influence and direct service delivery. She believes that meaningful change comes from listening to young people and placing their perspectives at the centre of reform. So, hi Brigid, I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. As you know, I'm the Managing Director of Coram Voice, and I've had the privilege of working for Coram Voice for 19 years, which is a terrifyingly long time. But actually, it's an amazing organisation to be part of. I've been the Managing Director now for 9 years, and it's such a privilege. For me, the main thing and the thing I really love about Coram Voice as an organisation is that we put children and young people's views at the heart and kind of believe that children and young people who are care experienced are the experts in their own lives. And if we're going to improve the care system, we need to listen and learn from their experience and engage them in making that positive change. And for me, that's kind of really central. And that's why I've stayed and continued to work for Coram Voice, because I passionately believe that.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Honestly, you've done a lot of work. I think I need to catch up a little bit before 22 right now.
Well, you've done amazingly in your work. You've done lots of things. So,
well, thank you. Well, you're the inspiration for all of us. But from your given life experience of the care system, has that influenced your career path?
I think it did. It has. Yeah, that's a big question. When so I remember being at university when I was in my third year. So I did my first degree was in sociology. And at that time, I don't know if they still do this now, but at that time they had a careers advice office, and you went there and they did kind of like psychometric tests. They weren't online because computers were really in their infancy at that point. So it's like I think in 1990. And, or maybe earlier. No, 1990. Anyway, filled in this form, and what the form told me was you should go into either working in social work or in the NHS as an NHS manager. And what I thought at that time was, I don't know if I could work in the NHS as an NHS manager, because you may have to shut down a hospital. That would be really awful. And I don't think I could do that. And I'm definitely not going into social work. So they were my two thoughts. I don't want to be a social worker. That's not going to happen. However, I then, so in the 1990s or 91, when I was graduating, we were at a time when there was kind of huge unemployment for graduates. So there weren't many jobs out there. Hardly any of my friends on the course had got jobs. And there was a job that was advertised that was working for the National Association of Young People in Care, NAPIC, which was in London, which was where I was from. And I thought, that does sound really interesting. It was an organisation run by and for young people in care. I'll apply for it. And I applied for it before I think it was like in June of my last year or something. And then got the job and started working in July. And from that, for almost all my career, apart from a little bit in the middle, I've worked with children and young people who are in and around the care system. So yes, it did send me on a trajectory. And I think had I not been care experienced, I would never have got the job working with NAPIC. And I think actually what that did was made me feel perhaps much more comfortable with being in care and kind of realising there was something that I could do with that was positive. So that's a long answer to
Well,
question.
I think what you did was amazing, and I don't think, things have changed throughout the years, because I know a lot of my friends are currently struggling to get jobs after leaving university.
It's tough. Yeah.
Were you like the first out of your friendship group to get a job with National Voice?
With NAPIC at the time, which then did go on to be a National Voice, so that's a good link. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was really, when we were doing our graduation ceremony, we had, I won't say who it was, but it was a member of the royal family who gives out the, what do you call them, the certificates.
We won't tell you,
when you go up, and she started by saying, "Congratulations, so what are you going on to do?" And everyone... Nothing, I haven't got a job, nothing, I haven't got a job. And then by the time she reached, because my last name begins with R, and it went in alphabetical order, by the time she reached me, she stopped asking people because, it was a really difficult time. There wasn't a lot. We were in recession, and there wasn't a lot of work out there. Much the same as now.
Beat the odds.
I was lucky it was the right job at the right time. So it was, it was really good.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. I sort of mentioned, you mentioned earlier that you're sort of part of NAPIC in its early days. So I was just wondering if you could kind of tell a little bit about what NAPIC was and sort of what you actually got up to with the organisation, if that's all right.
So NAPIC started in 1979, and it came off the back of work that was done by the Who Cares project at that time, really looking at kind of issues for young people and children who are care experienced. And I mean, NAPIC as an organisation, incredible, because what it was an organisation that was set up and run by and for children and young people who were care experienced. So everyone who worked for it was care experienced. Everyone who worked for it was 25 and under. So it really was a kind of, I suppose, like a kind of children's rights movement in the real sense, because it was run by children and young people.
It's incredible.
In terms of, and your phrase, what we got up to, so it was a campaigning organisation, and it was an organisation that was run, it wasn't a trade union, but it was kind of run on a kind of format where you had like central offices, and then you had like kind of subgroups as well.
Okay.
So I suppose a bit like a National Voice is today in some ways. So we had offices, when I worked there, we had offices in London and Manchester. And there was a group of the kind of central NAPIC, and then there were there were NAPIC groups all around the country, where young people would talk about the issues that were happening in their area. This was before kind of children in care councils, and they'd be kind of fed in nationally. What are the issues coming up for young people? We had a network of, I suppose, a kind of community where we sent newsletters, communicated with people across the country, all done by post. So it wasn't like email or internet. We didn't have computers, which kind of seems amazing now.
I don't know how you managed that. I just need my phone on me 24/7. Can't be me.
And the things that we did were so kind of instrumental in before I was there, in the Children Act campaigns around banning something that was called the order book. So back in the day, in the 1980s and probably before that, when a young person was in care and they wanted to buy some clothing or needed some clothes, there were only certain shops that they could go to, and it wasn't done with cash. It was done with this kind of like order book. And so you'd go with your residential worker and you would buy whatever was in this shop. They tended to be pretty, not dodgy shops, but maybe not the most stylish shops, and you'd have to buy what was there, and the order book was filled in. So it was kind of really stigmatizing for people, because they know that you're in care, you're in a shop, you can't make any choice about it.
Absolutely.
And there was a big campaign that was done by NAPIC on that, to ban it, and they stopped it. That was successful across the country. And then the other thing was kind of feeding into a lot of work, really raising awareness, I think, primarily around the experiences of young people in care. What's the reality of being a young person in care? What are the things that kind of impact on you? What are the things that need to change? And kind of really making the was going to say the establishment, that sounds a bit 1980s, but really making kind of policymakers, I suppose, sit up and think about actually when you're making policies and you're making decisions, you're dealing with real people, not just a kind of number or a child in care. These are actually people that it's going to impact on. And I know it's interesting for the podcast, I was reading back through this article in Social Work Today or Community Care, one of the magazines, and it was saying, it was an interview, and in it they were saying, NAPIC has been accused of being kind of quite provocative and only talking about the negative things in care and wanting to kind of promote that. And at the time, our response was actually the reasons for doing that is to raise awareness on kind of not that everything's bad, but the things that need to change.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I was sort of just curious, as like a little bit of a follow-on to that, just like sort of in terms of like the size of NAPIC, like how sort of in its heyday, was it quite a big organisation? Because I know you mentioned there was like little groups sort of like spread across the country, and then you had central bases. Yeah. I'm just sort of curious if you did know.
I don't know.
Okay.
The thing I was going to go on to say was that we did have I think it was our annual general meeting or a conference, and we, I think as we touched on earlier, actually, we were, NAPIC sent out information across all the local authorities in England and invited young people to come, and they could come with their workers or carers. And we went to Butlins in Skegness for the second time I've been to Skegness. We went to Butlins in Skegness for, I think we stayed 2 nights there, and I think about 200 young people came to that.
Wow.
And that was about kind of getting young people together. I think they were over the age of maybe 13 or 12. We didn't have any children there, or younger children there, talking about kind of what their experiences are, what they wanted to see changed.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for saying. I was sort of curious about that. And I know you earlier showing us a little photo from, was it, I think, from that event?
I think it was that.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't got a label on it, so.
Yeah. It just seems so cool, because it seemed like it was sort of in like this sort of warehouse or something. I know you said it was in Butlins, but it just seemed like really cool, and had like a cool little like NAPIC sign at the back of the photo, which just seems amazing. So thank you very much for sharing.
No, and it's funny when you look back at those, because they were, that photographs was definitely from the 1990s. And actually that's, 30 years ago now. So they look quite dated and quite old fashioned in some ways. But yeah, I mean, actually it was it was very inspiring. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that, whilst, lots of things have changed and things have really improved, but some of the issues still remain the same, or some of the things that young people are talking about now are similar.
Yeah, thank you.
I think after this, I need to ask you some questions about, your personal life and whether everything was in black and white, because 1990s is so much further from when I was actually born. So, we have lots to talk about. But, honestly,
that makes me feel old.
Okay, maybe just forget what I was saying. But, honestly, from the way that you speak about your journey and from where you kind of grew up, and it's amazing to see someone with such compassion and the love that you have for the work. I can see it through your eyes. And I was like, it's fun. I was like, damn, yes, I like having people like you being in charge of things that actually affect
that's sweet.
Human beings, like living people. I was going to say creatures, but we're not creatures.
No, that's very kind, very moving.
But, before, you did say, a lot of the times you do focus on the sad things surrounding the care system. And I know it can be quite easy to always look down on the certain things and the bad things that are going on, and it can be quite challenging. But I kind of wanted to know, from your perspective, can you share a success story from your time with NAPIC, if it's possible? Would you have loads?
Yeah,
I mean, that order book just sounds like a real success story, just as an example.
I wasn't involved in NAPIC when that happened. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I was actually thinking when you were saying that about the kind of wider success stories. So I think, NAPIC did a lot of work around, but can by no means take credit for this because loads of other people did as well, but around kind of raising the issues of young people, or the experiences of young people when they were leaving care, and kind of the whole lack of support. And when kind of thinking of your question, Salma, about, sometimes things can sound really negative as though they haven't changed, but they have. You know, when I think about kind of young people leaving care and the fact, you know, the expectation back in, you know, the 1980s, maybe that young people left care at 16 and then 18, that there was no leaving care support, very little kind of financial support. And now we're in a position where, you know, where young people can, and I know I'm not saying it's ideal by any means, but in terms of, you know, having support, if people want it until they're 25, the support when young people are going to university, both kind of financially and in terms of accommodation and stuff. The things like the kind of apprenticeships and stuff that are on offer in relation to young people who are care experienced. None of those things, you know, kind of existed back in the day. And actually, I think those things and that recognition that young people leaving care, you know, need that support because they don't have the support of their families, and so therefore kind of need and should have ongoing support if they're going to kind of flourish into adult life. I think it's really important and a real kind of win.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and just sort of like following on from that, so like since sort of like your time with NAPIC and just sort of think about all of like the sort of until where we are today, I was just wondering how you think like children's rights and advocacy has changed since that sort of time, because I sort of appreciate it's been like quite a sort of chunk of time between sort of NAPIC and where we are today with sort of National Voice and everything. Yeah. So I was just wondering if you can kind of share a little bit.
So I think in some ways we're in a completely different place. Maybe that's slightly overstated, but in a different place. And I think, you know, we had obviously NAPIC, you know, NAPIC started in the 70s and went on until the end of the 90s. During that time, we had the Children Act that came into force, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the idea, you know, that children and young people should be kind of listened to and involved in decisions made about them. And also a complaints process in place, an advocacy system put in place for children in care and care leavers, children in care councils put in place. So lots of things happened over that, and, you know, and other things as well, but lots of things happened over that period of time to make, to kind of put the expectation that children's and young people's voices would be listened to, and that did make a difference. And I think over time, what we've seen is a kind of general acceptance, widely speaking, I don't want to talk in blanket terms, that actually we should be listening to young people, and listening to young people will help us improve the system. It doesn't mean that everyone does do that, and it doesn't mean that everyone does kind of act on what they've heard. But I think, and we were talking earlier about, you know, there was a kind of fear, and I remember in the beginning of the 90s, a kind of fear that, you know, if we ask young people what they want and they say what they want, it's going to be completely unrealistic. The reality is that's not the case, you know, and young people are very, you guys, very kind of insightful and come out with really important points, many of which are completely doable quite easily. And I think there was also a kind of feeling that if we kind of let young people know about their rights, well, we can't give people rights because, you know, if you have rights and you have responsibilities. And so there was this kind of idea that children's rights was a bit uncomfortable for people. But I think now there's more of a recognition, generally, that actually people have rights whether they take responsibility or not. The fact that you don't take responsibility doesn't take away your rights. So I think we've kind of moved. So I think we've moved forward, but I think, you know, obviously there's still a long way to go. And, you know, and I think back to, you know, the work that AMV did a number of years ago. I'm trying to think, was it in the, you know, 2000 and something, around the bin bag campaign and the work around, you know, that young people shouldn't have to move with their belongings in a bin bag. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous that young people and children are in that position. their campaign to kind of eradicate that, which was really, it was in 2001, I think, when I was working in local authority.
I think it kind of thing is still kind of ongoing to this day.
It does.
But it's like crazy because a lot of people have kind of said that they felt like a piece of trash going from one place to another, which of course is quite sad and kind of in a way disgusting that a child should go through that. But what is your kind of input about that whole thing of, how young people feel like they are just like pieces of a puzzle in a system that doesn't truly understand them?
I think the thing about the bin bag is the bin bags is really important, and and something that it shouldn't continue to happen, but we know it does. Something about young people. I think I think young people. It's a hard question. I think young people. I think one of the things that is really sad and can be a truism is if the care system, the impact of it on a child or young person is that it makes them feel worthless. I think what that system has done is not done its job properly, because what the care system is set up to do is not only to protect children and young people, but also to create an environment that kind of enables them to kind of thrive and cherishes them as individuals. And and so if it hasn't happened, I think that makes me feel a bit sad. And I think it should make everyone who works in social care kind of also feel sad and make them motivated to make changes, so no child or young person feels like that.
Yeah, and I remember sort of a positive response to the bin bag campaign that we mentioned earlier, that a lot of local authorities were investing in getting suitcases so that young people wouldn't have bin bags that they're taken around from placements.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember working as I said, I was running a leave-in care service at the time, and it was such a simple thing to do. And I think also at the time there were actually some charities that I can't remember what charity it was that collaborated with the National Voice and provided suitcases. So as a local, but the thing I think is is we need to, when we do things like that, we kind of need to maintain them, and they need to be kind of hardwired into the system. I think also kind of thinking of A&V, the kind of recent work that's been done by you guys, I imagine, with the setting up home allowance in terms of, actually getting, there was the information that went out to local authorities in, I imagine, the local government circular about paying £3,000 for the setting up home allowance. There was the work that was done by A&V, and actually a lot of local authorities weren't doing that. Is what came back from that, and they were using, the money was being spent in different ways and different things. And then the work with the minister to get that information again to go out to directors and for it to be in guidance, I believe, is actually really powerful. And what you have now is something that had gone out, wasn't happening. There's lots of policy that we have that sometimes is not enacted by local authorities in the way that it should be, or done by local authorities in the way that it should be. But actually in that area, what you've now got is it going out and again and really strengthened. And now if a young person isn't getting that, who's a care leaver, they could be saying, actually, it says this in the guidance. You have a duty, unequivocally, a duty to do that. That's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, yeah. And just sort of following on from the sort of amazing work that A&V is saying, as sort of mentioned earlier, sort of looking forward to the future a little bit, what would you like to kind of see sort of changed on top of all the sort of amazing stuff that's going on at the moment?
Changed in?
Just in the sort of care system and sort of rights and advocacy in general, really. So,
big question.
I know, it's quite a big question.
What would I like to see change? I think one of the things, and there's lots of different ways to answer this question, but I will kind of leap on one thing, is that one of the things I think, and again, I think we were talking about this earlier before this podcast, was the thing about kind of young people when they are young people, as they move towards leaving care and when they leave care, actually having people around them who are outside the local authority. So you don't have, and I know we were talking about this, you know, leaving care at 21, leaving care at 25, and do you still have a cliff edge? And actually how the care system can develop, how the care system works to support children and young people to develop relationships and a sense of community. So by the time you kind of leave care, you have that support around you to then move into adult life. And because I think it's again, we were talking about this earlier, it's really interesting, this idea that you know that for any of us that the idea that you ever become independent. And I think we have this idea, and we talk about it in leaving care, you move towards independence. And it's a fallacy, you know, I think, because for all of us, all through our lives, we're all dependent. We have interdependencies with people around us. And I think what the care system, what I would love to see is that it actually, you know, and it does sometimes, it actually strengthens and develops those bonds for children and with children and young people.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. And just sort of like one last sort of follow-up question, this like last one for this question, I'll move on. Just because we're sort of mentioning about those sort of transition points with sort of like staying in care at 21 or 25, just sort of thinking, because the sort of staying in care up to the age of 25 was quite a recent change that kind of came into effect. So I was just sort of wondering if you could kind of go back in time and have that option when you were in care yourself. Would you stay in care up until the age of, or like in the sort of care, leaving care until the age of 25?
Absolutely.
Nice.
So I think my reason for wanting to do that, and I think it's really, we did talk about this kind of on a kind of personal level and a work level. So I think if, you know, 25, the ages are kind of arbitrary, aren't they? So, you know, one 25-year-old is not the same as another 25-year-old, but I suppose you have to kind of jump somewhere. But I think having the support until you're 25 in this case, what it enables you to do is, you know, to start on your career, you know, or go to university or be supported while you're doing an apprenticeship, whatever trajectory you're taking, and actually establish yourself in adult life to a certain degree with support, and with support if kind of things go wrong, if you need some kind of backup. And I think that's really, really important. I think, you know, in the average age for leaving care, you know, the average age of leaving home in the country is, you know, it's now in its 30s, so it's getting older. But I think one of the things, you know, as we talked about earlier, this thing about this kind of cliff edge, I think one of the things that is important is kind of looking at young people also as individuals. So, you know, for some people, 25 might not be right, 24 might be, for some people 27 might be right, and how as a kind of social care or care system we can meet the individual needs of young people and make it kind of more person-centred in its approach, rather than being kind of hard and fast for everyone, regardless of their needs.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Honestly, I was all waiting for you to answer that question because I really wanted to hear it, because, you know, you were talking about your little story of when you turned 18 and then you went straight to, you went out somewhere, you went out of the country, traveling. Yeah, I was just like, you know, at home, still like, you know, in the care system. So our stories are quite different. So I really wanted to know from your perspective of if, you know, things were the way that they are nowadays, if that would have kind of changed your mind. Because for me, I don't think I was thinking about traveling the world at 19. So I know you were speaking about, you know, like the whole thing of being 25 and leaving care. But I kind of wanted to, there was something that we discussed before outside of this podcast, and we're having a really in-depth conversation about this. But technically, when you do leave care, even if you're 37, etc., are you technically leaving care, or is that just part of your experience and who you are, like, forever? And what is your input about that?
Good question. Yeah, because we talk about leaving care as kind of an event.
Mm.
And certainly in, and people, and then we also talk about being care experienced as a kind of defining characteristic, and or as a characteristic. And certainly the discussion that you guys know about with in relation to care as a protected characteristic is centered on actually your care experience. That's something that you've experienced as a child or young person, and that experience lives with you. And so therefore, like other protected characteristics around kind of ethnicity, gender, etc., that should be
Do you think it's like it becomes normalized when it's like put against, your age, your sex, everything else, and then there's like, being a caregiver. So now it's like part of something that's so normal, so it's not a stigma anymore.
Yeah, that was the conversation we were having, wasn't it? About whether, I think I was talking about before about not talking about being in care, and I think you were, being care experienced, I suppose, as a young adult. And you were, we were talking about whether having care experience as a protected characteristic would have made that easier.
Yeah.
And I think it would do, because what you would have, and I know people have kind of different thoughts on it, but I think one of the things that would definitely come from that is a greater understanding of what it means to be care experienced.
Absolutely.
And I think, as you're saying, it kind of, I don't know what the right word is, not mainstreams, but it kind of it does make it part of kind of everyday conversation, something that's talked about, rather than something that people might make assumptions about that aren't right. So I think it would make it easier.
Perfect. The next one is Coram Voice plays a significant role in amplifying young people's voices. How do you make it core of what you do?
Yeah, so I think, as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons why I love being the managing director of Coram Voice is because for us, kind of putting young voices is at the centre of what we do is core to our work. I think one of the things for us, and there's a number of different things that we do in relation to this, and I think we do it across all different areas of our work. But one of the things that was really important to us was actually when we had a conversation in 2017 with a National Voice, and actually the opportunity for a National Voice to join Coram Voice, and actually for us and for me that was really important, because the alternative was it might have kind of stopped existing as well. And it was really important because actually having an organisation that is or a group that is focused on run by young people, talking about what for young people who are care experienced are important and what needs to change is really crucial. And so I suppose that's one of the ways in which we do it, among many others.
Perfect. And then to add to that, there's of course how important is a National Voice to you, but I want to add both. Can you answer it in a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint? Because I think being a care leaver is like a superpower to have, because now you're working for a system that you were a part of. And I think that's insane. Like, that is a new definition of like being a human with like so many powers. Like, you might as well be Superwoman at this point. But, so how important is it from a professional standpoint and a personal one to you, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no, it's fine. So from a professional standpoint, I think, and also that I'm a qualified social worker. So I think from a professional standpoint, it's really important, if you're working and involved in children's social care or around children's social care, to not forget the importance of listening to children and young people. I think sometimes when you work in as a professional in systems, you can get kind of caught up in the day-to-day. And there's a lot of kind of requirements, regulations, law, etc., that you have to adhere to. And sometimes children's voices, you get a bit lost in that. And I think what AMV does is it brings us back to what's important. And I think one of the really great things, actually, it does all great things, but one of the really lovely things is with our AMV's Amplify Awards, is actually shining a light on kind of good practice in co-production and how involving young people in, whether it's service design, service ideas, can really make tangible differences for young people. I think that's really important. And I think that's really important. And as a professional, it's often really working, say if you're working for a local authority, it's often really useful to, you can think, I really want to do this and really want to change something, and it feels very difficult to do that. But if a colleague in another local authority has done it and you can learn from them, you can then also say to your local authority, well, they've done it next door, we could do that. And, it makes it easier, and you have those kind of practice examples. So from a personal point of view, I believe kind of intrinsically in the rights of children, and that the care system could do better. And I think also, I suppose one of my kind of driving forces as an individual is around kind of fairness, and sometimes the experiences of young people in leaving care is unfair. That sounds very basic and slightly a little childish, but it's kind of something, that thing about social justice is kind of quite ingrained in me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for answering sort of all the questions before. It's just been so amazing just to sort of listen to you. I feel like I've just been, I feel like it's been taking a step back and just like listening away. But just to ask one last sort of question before we start finishing up, just like moving away from sort of all the questions we've asked so far, just like talking a bit about role models, because we were talking a bit about that before we started the podcast. And I was just sort of wondering, because like role models are so important to sort of lots of people sort of like growing up as they get older, help shape their worldview and their sort of experiences. I was just sort of wondering, sort of as growing up in care, did you have any role models?
Yeah, you asked me this before, didn't you, when we were talking earlier? So I was thinking then about, kind of role models who were care experienced. And I suppose the kind of truthful answer is no, not really. So there were, and I think, as we talked about earlier, there weren't many people at that time, in the late 80s, who really talked about being care experienced.
Because we're talking a lot about the stigma behind sharing
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So people not really talking about it, not wanting to share it. And I think now there is, and that's really great. And as you're saying, people talk about it as being their superpower or various, other things, and that's really great. I certainly had people who were kind of supportive. So, my foster carer was supportive after I, moved out. And her support worker, and then various kind of family friends, and also some family members as well. So I don't know role model. There wasn't anyone that I saw that I thought, but maybe there was. Maybe I've just forgotten. Anyone I saw that I thought, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. I didn't really have that. I wanted to be an actress for a while, so I might have wanted to be Kate Winslet for a bit. But then I decided I didn't want to do that because I couldn't bear the rejection. So, but no, unfortunately not. I feel I should have a role model. Maybe I have to develop one there.
Yeah, well, just thank you for your answer. It's okay if you don't have a role model, but just sort of explain sort of your sort of reasons as to why. So thank you very much for sharing. So I just wanted to thank you so much for sort of like agreeing to be on the podcast and sort of answering questions. I feel like I've learned so much, and I feel like I haven't been talking for a lot of the time, just been listening so intently. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dyllan and Salma, for inviting me and talking to me.
Yeah. Honestly, to add to that, thank you for obviously like sharing your journey with us as well, and your vision from when you were young to now the successful woman that you are. I think your leadership is something that I truly do have taken inspiration from. But I kind of wanted to ask you one question. Is there any advice that you would give to care leavers?
Okay.
Just that. It's simple.
But that is not simple. Any advice to give to care leavers, or my kind of thoughts? I mean, I think what I would say to young people leaving care, in a way, is I would say to, what I was going to say was in a way is what I would say to any young person, but I don't know if that's entirely true. But what I would say to any care leaver is actually you can do and achieve whatever you want. That don't let your experiences of the past hold you back. And also to make use of the support around you, whether that's kind of financial support, emotional support, and make the most of it. And the message I would give to my son is actually, as you're moving through that, he's not a care leaver, but as you're kind of moving up to 25, make use of the support that is around before you hit 25. Because lots of kind of some support ends at 25. So kind of make the most of that. But I would say dream big. And I think one of the things that I find, sometimes kind of a bit interesting about the care system is that our kind of aspirations for young people aren't that great. And I think, I would say don't, have your own aspirations. Don't let people limit you in terms of dreaming big. And I think also some people talk really well about this in terms of the skills that children and young people learn from growing up in the care system, how to get on with people, how to navigate systems, how to live in different places, how to deal with difficult relationships, are all amazing skills. And we talk about them with quite negative experiences, but actually if you turn them on their heads, those skills are really useful in terms of moving forward in your adult life.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Caring About Care is produced by Coram Voice and A National Voice. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts so you don't miss out on future episodes. Thank you.